And first up, we have Antonio Brown. So recently there was a lot of drama with the whole Antonio Brown kind of mess going on in Pittsburgh. He was recently featured on LeBron's The Shop on HBO, talking all kinds of trash about his former or current coach until he gets traded, Tomlin, and his future Hall of Famer quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger. And it quickly went from 12 teams down to 2 teams because no one wanted to deal with all his diva drama that was going on. He was left with 2 teams. That was the Oakland Raiders and Tennessee Titans. And to make a long story short, the Raiders quickly made a move out of the 2 teams. They offered the Pittsburgh Steelers.
The Pittsburgh Steelers will receive a 3rd round and a 5th round draft pick in this year's NFL draft. But real quick to add on to that, I don't know, I'm sure many people got the notification, but last Thursday, Thursday the 7th, it was late. I remember this being super late. I got a notification late that he had actually been close to, if not, he was a Buffalo Bills. And then I remember in the middle of the night and towards the early morning, the deal actually, it did not happen. So for whatever reason, that deal fell apart. And then, the Steelers worked all weekend to get a deal done. And then I think it was around 9 o'clock Pacific time that a deal struck through that he was 9 o'clock Saturday the 9th that he was an Oakland Raider. And then people woke up early this morning, the 10th, and found out about the deal.
And rumor has it, until all the details come out, we don't know for sure, but rumor has it that the Raiders are giving him $30.1 million guaranteed over a 3-year span with an additional $24 million in incentives. Now, this is a big deal because, for one, this is an increase to what he was earning in Pittsburgh. And 2, if we go back a year ago, Khalil Mack wanted a big deal. They refused to give it to him because they're going into rebuild mode, but yet they go out on the limb and give this huge deal to Antonio Brown. Little weird for the situation they're dealing with, but, they do have to fill those seats, and they are in the middle of trying to move to Las Vegas, so it kind of makes sense for a business standpoint, just not for a team standpoint.
Yeah, it's an interesting move. It's always hard to tell right away what's going to happen with a trade or a free agent signee. Going on to that real quick, I just want to add this. I did a little bit of research before for this, and I looked into the top 5, and then I'll even say the top 6. Receivers all time in terms of yards for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You got Hines Ward, who's number 1. He was actually a 3rd round draft pick. Antonio Brown, he's number 2, who was a 6th round draft pick. John Stallworth, he was a 4th round. Heath Miller, he was actually a tight end, and he is their 4th receiving in yards. There's a gentleman by the name of Lewis Lips. He was actually a 1st round draft pick back in 1984. And then you have Lynn Swann, who was their 6th receiving yards, and he was their 21st pick for the Steelers back in 1974. So it's interesting to say who won this deal. Because on paper you don't know what you're getting, but for the Steelers, they only got a 3rd round and they got a 5th round pick, but when you have Juju Smith, who's now going to be your number 1 wide receiver, you find a way to complement him, and I don't think the Steelers are going to be worried at all.
Exactly. Pittsburgh's in a position where they can easily move on. I mean, it's very rare that a team can move on from the best running back as well as the best wide receiver, arguably, in the league. They can easily move on from that with... they can fill that void with the pieces that they have now. Obviously, they do have to pick up another wide receiver because Juju Smith-Schuster is obviously going to get double teamed, but those are just little issues to deal with. But it allows them to easily move on. So you brought up those yards, and it's really good statistical. Really brings up a really good point. I listen to Colin Cowherd from Fox Sports every single day on the way to work, and he brought up a really good point that I never really paid attention to. And he's been talking about this whole Antonio Brown thing for the last, I want to say, 2 weeks since all the drama unfolded, and he broke down. Him and his team broke down this statistic that made so much more sense after he kind of laid it out. And what it was is, over the last 10 Super Bowls, only one team, and I'll name that team later, only one team had a big name star wide receiver. So basically the point he was trying to make is that nowadays teams can win with B and B plus wide receivers. You know, the Rams with Brandon Cooks, the Patriots with Julian Edelman and Gronk and all these guys. You know, these big names like Odell Beckham and Antonio Brown, Tyreek Hill. You know, Tyreek Hill and the Chiefs did make it pretty far, but besides that, all these other teams didn't have big star wide receivers. And, you know, so Colin's point that he was making is that over the last 10 years, only one team won the Super Bowl with an all-star wide receiver, and that was the Denver Broncos, and that was with Demaryius Thomas, who is maybe not an A+, but a little less, like maybe an A-, but he's in A's. Yeah. And it was such a good point. I had to kind of stop and think about it. Yeah. And it made so much sense.
To add on to that point, and I thinking about it, I'm like going through my head, and you know, that was Peyton Manning's last year that they won the ring against a really good Carolina Panthers defense. It's funny you mentioned that, because I think about the Steelers. I think about the Seattle Seahawks most recent Super Bowl win, and you know, they went against Peyton Manning in that, and Peyton Manning had at that time, you know, he had Demaryius Thomas, he had Eric Decker, and he had Wes Welker, but that defense was so good that the Seattle defense was so good that they stopped Denver. And think about that. Think about the Seattle Seahawks, like, wide receivers who won the Super Bowl. Like, I mean, probably their number one is Doug Baldwin, and I can't even put a fact to that one.
Yeah, and a lot of people, like I said, I would have never thought about it until he kind of laid out all the facts, and you can't. I mean, there's nothing to argue. It's on paper, and that's kind of the truth. And that his whole argument was, going forward, you know, let's not focus on signing these big guys. And that's kind of why it was down, besides the drama, why it was down to two, you know, Oakland and Tennessee teams that it's like, okay, they don't even have a chance at winning the Super Bowl.